I almost missed it because I didn't remember it was 1 hour actually before usual time in Italy, but then I realized, and I'm luckily on time.
Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
What is that?
What's what?
I hear this big buzz like an airplane landing or something.
I unmuted myself and an airplane was still passing by. I thought it had gone. Yeah.
I'm still hearing it. It's still there.
You hear it now?
Oh, hi, Angela.
I'm going to unmute and see if you still hear it.
Hi, Mary Claire. Looks cold there. Well, I have not prepared it today because I had this nephew of mine died, and we've just had to be organizing the funeral and everything like that. And so I was caught in doing that. And so now it's done. So I'm here.
I hear on the radio that Italy is shutting down again.
It is. It's shut down today. It's shut down Monday. So yeah. And we went to this little funeral that we did today, but otherwise I wouldn't have gone out.
How do you feel? Are you okay?
Me?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry for the loss.
Oh, thank you. I feel better now that we've kind of got it all organized. So yeah.
Was it in America
No,
or somewhere else?
Here.
Is it little? Is a child?
No, he was the son of my ex-husband's sister, but they had some kind of family disagreements, and then not everybody was speaking to everybody else, and so those of us that were still speaking to him got it together. So,
oh, that's so stressful when it happens.
It
that
is.
way.
Yeah.
Then you have all the stress on top of the stress of losing somebody.
Yeah. Well, it was all a sort of an unfortunate group of people, really. So anyway, it's done. How is everybody? Other than me. Shall we check in? Is Letitia not coming? Anybody know?
I don't know, but I can MC the process. So
yeah.
Who wants to check in first? Frida, you're on my first one on my screen. So do you want to start off?
Oh yeah, I was there before you. Let's see. Well, I'm pretty sleepy. We've lost an hour, of course, on top of everything else, but my body didn't know that it was an hour later, so I stayed up too late. But let's see. I'm kind of excited about the next Zoom discussion. That's going to be me and Maria Suarez. I need to do some more preparation for that. And Suzette, has had surgery, so she's getting a little better. She's got use of some fingers, even though she can't use her thumb on that hand. And so my duties have shrunk a bit, so that's good. But yeah, it's still quite a bit of extra work. So I feel a little bit rushed on things, but I didn't want to miss this and find out what happened next in the book. So I'm glad to see you all. It's always a pleasure, and carry on.
There was a cartoon in the New Yorker that was something to the effect that there are two people and one of them saying, why am I so concerned about losing an hour when I've just lost a year?
Yeah.
Really.
Okay, Elena, you're next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. I'm also looking forward for next chapters of your book and of this discussion. I'm fine. I'm well. The weather is being very nice. I have a view on the sea from my windows, so I'm happy. This is my check-in for now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful to see the sea.
Yes.
Okay, Jen, you're next.
Well, I already told you all about all of this that was happening with me, but other than that, I'm doing fine. And let's see. It is locked down here, so we are pretty much limited in whatever it is that we're doing. And I did an interview with Elena and some women, one in Italy and one in Spain, right? Of a mother's organization. Yeah, and so we did
Yes.
that. It was on Facebook. And then I did another one last week. But anyway, we've been doing that. And that's it.
Okay, let's see, Mary Claire.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, I guess good evening. And Jen, I'm so sorry for both the loss and the added stress of having to pull together family members to honor a life when there's strife that has kept people from communicating across kindred lines. There's a grief to that that's additional. So my heart goes out to you. Yeah. And here in Cactus Springs at the Sekhmet Temple, it's a lovely, I know Jen, you said it looks cold there. I'm just still in my early morning before the house fully heats up, but it's a lovely migration this week toward Equinox Ostara, and the shoots coming up in our greenhouse and in one of the guest rooms that doubles as a little room for seeds and starts, and guests who will be coming, and the spaciousness of the outdoor spaces where we can still gather for ceremony and for ritual and do it in a way that's comfortable and safe for everyone. So that all feels, we're just so blessed in that respect, and the continuation of the restoration of some of the damage that was done to the temple walls and the repainting, and all of that is coming together quite miraculously, just sort of out of nowhere, by people who have jumped in to provide their time and skill and expertise and materials. So just really lovely all around, and very much looking forward to the continuation, part 2 of this really important discussion. So thank you.
Angela Miles, are you online? Can you hear us?
Angela, can you hear?
Okay, Sherry.
Hello, everyone. I just got in after an hour and a half drive from the doctor's. It's a beautiful day outside here, and it was a lovely, lovely drive. And I'm happy to be back in time to be able to join you today and to continue this discussion.
Welcome.
Liliana?
Hi, everyone. I wanted to tell everyone that my partner's niece that had a double lung transplant in Chicago is fine. I mean, of course, given her lungs were destroyed by COVID, but so they had to, after a long time, she's been dealing with this since like May of last year. And she finally got her lung transplant, and her husband and her 2 kids went to visit her, and she's doing a lot better. I mean, she's gonna have to be in Chicago. She's from Texas. She's gonna have to be in Chicago for a year to get used to these new lungs, but at least she's alive, and she looks kind of good, as good as she could look. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Other than that, everything is good, and I'm excited about the theme today. I think it's something I'm interested in. So hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here.
Great. That's wonderful to hear.
Okay, Linda,
Yes, am I muted or not?
you're okay.
Can
We
you-
hear you.
Okay. It's a beautiful sunny day in Halifax. It started out at minus 15, I think, this morning, with a wind chill of minus 20 something. And we're supposed to go up to, and we've already gone up to plus 0. It was 4 degrees when I came back from having taken my husband into the city for a meeting, and I got here in time, so I was really pleased with that as well. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. I think we were beginning to do some really good work last time.
Okay, Angela Miles. Are you
I think she can't hear us. Angela
Yeah.
Miles?
yeah, I think she can't hear us. We see you, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear us?
Okay, well, I'll do my check-in, and then we'll see, and when she comes on, we can go back to her. I'm doing really well. I had I'm now just about completely recovered from my surgery 2 weeks, week and a whatever ago, and I had some adventures. I had to have a follow-up visit to the doctor. When I called the doctor's office, they are closed this week for spring break. So I spent a while on the phone trying to figure out what I needed to do, but everything's fine and working well. So everybody's checked in now, right? Oh, Letitia, you want to jump right in?
Hi,
Hi.
So we've all checked
my
in.
computer was, one of my good.
We've all checked in.
I'm good.
It's your turn.
Okay, I'm good and I'm late. Sorry about that. That's my check-in. I'm glad to be here.
And the other thing is that I finally got new speakers, and so for the first time in several weeks, I can now hear everybody clearly without having to fuss around with the phone and without having to wear earphones. So that's good. Angela Miles, are you now within hearing range and ready to check in?
What is she doing? I don't understand how
Yeah,
she can not hear us.
Well, she seems to be able to hear because she heard me. I mean, her note in the chat makes it sound like she actually heard.
Where? I
So,
don't think she did.
Um,
I don't see her in the chat.
oh.
There's a
Oh,
note.
no, that
there's,
was from Sherry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a note from early on that says, I can't hear anyone and working on it. There are no options visible for any action I can take. I will exit and see if I can see any before this stage. I'm with us in spirit. So
Yeah.
I guess she's still trying.
Yeah, I put a note that she could get the audio by telephone if she has a good long distance plan, which I don't know if she does or not. Okay, well, let's get started then. And it is being recorded, so we're set up for that. As I said last week, this book does not explicitly mention maternal gifting, nor does it explicitly mention matriarchy, although they're both sort of there in the background. My chapter reinterprets the stories of women in the Hebrew Bible, which I think are foundational to our Western culture, from a secular point of view, but not in terms of gifting, although I realize that there are a number of quotes about children being the gift of God. So I frame this discussion in the relationship between motherhood and mothering. Everyone needs a motherer, but that is not necessarily the biological mother. And everyone needs a relationship, but not necessarily with biological children. I found a quote a couple days ago that I think summarizes this. The author, whose name is Sarah Menkadick, had written an article about motherhood. And this was in the Literary Hub. She said, I received one email that stood out. It was written by a woman from her husband's email account. This woman ranted at me for taking women back to the Stone Age. Clearly, she didn't know about matriarchy, and harangued me for assuming all women wanted to give birth. In my advocacy of motherhood as a vital subject, she saw a single mandate for being a woman, and she fought back against that mandate. It did not occur to her that we can acknowledge birth as relevant to everyone in our 2021 society, as deeply transformational and powerful and important, without having to see all women as mothers, or without having to think of all mothers as having given birth. In her purview, you choose birth, or you choose liberated womanhood, and what you did implicated all the women watching you. So I propose, as I did last week, for discussion, the question, how does maternal gift economy promote choices for women and support women so they don't need to decide not to have children or to take care of children because of poverty and trauma, without othering women who do not have children? So I throw the floor open.
Can I just say that I can hear everybody now? I don't know if you saw the chat, but I was totally, anyway, I still can't see any options on my screen to do things, but I'm glad to be with you all. Thank you.
Do you want to check in?
Oh, no, seems like you're well started.
No, well, we just got started, actually. We haven't actually started yet. I just did my intro.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm sorry. I'm very, very sorry to miss it. I'm really looking forward to the discussion, and I think that's an interesting thing to be considering around gift economy in this question. So that's great. Thanks.
Okay, so who wants to jump in?
Judith, would you mind reading that last thing over again, just the last few lines that you would like us to consider?
The question, as I propose it, and this group is always set up its own question. So if you want to talk about something else, I have no real attachment to this. But what I thought my book is about child-free lifestyle. And the question is, how does that fit with the mothering of gift economy? And how do we make it clear that when we talk about mothering, we don't necessarily mean either that everyone has to be a mother, or that there's a conflict between motherhood and child freedom. How do we hold both of those and leave a woman's option to have children or not to have children as a free choice that's not dictated either by poverty and trauma, and but also not dictated by pressure of the expectation to have biological children.
Well, I wonder, I just propose a springboard because we were having a rich and sort of varied discussion kind of as we approached the 2-hour mark last week. And there was a lot of momentum that was building. And I think that was when Sherry made some statements that we were all kind of chomping at the bit to discuss more and ask, kind of go into that direction. And then we realized we needed, so much time had gone. And I wonder, Judith, if you were if you had held that pause and that topic, or maybe if anyone else had, if we want to kind of recap on where that, I mean, my memory was kind of where this question of motherhood and maternal ways of being, as it has to do with all peoples, regardless of gender, and kind of the implications for that. What just went in the, oh, that looks like just the introduction. Okay. So I wondered if there was any desire to kind of go back to that midway point and give a summary of that, if that's possible, or if we just want to kind of start over and jump in.
I will admit I didn't re-listen to last month, so I don't remember exactly where the discussion ended.
Well, I hate to put Sherry, I hate to put you on the spot, but you had to go and you spoke very passionately and eloquently, and then a whole bunch of discussions started to popcorn, and then we kind of had to wrap it up. So I wondered if one option would be to ask you to kind of restate some of where you were going with your comments.
I never remember what I say because I'm never scripted. So, I mean, I usually, I can't remember what I say 10 minutes after I say something. So I think that if we just start getting back into the conversation, things will start coming up for us again naturally. And then, memories might be jogged. It's been a hectic time for me in the last.
I just put the table of contents up into the chat. So if that triggers anybody with any discussions, any of the topics that are in the book, again, they're not specific to gifting, but they may trigger some discussions of gifting. Some of them are about being proud and articulate about not wanting children. Some of them are not wanting children out of trauma or poverty. And some of them are sociological discussions of definitions. I think we had some talk about the definitions last time. So see if that triggers any thoughts.
Well,
I just want to say that I think that what I talked about the last time is different words for mother and mothering, and how they connected to very different aspects of our being. I think that might have been,
Yeah.
might have been what it was. So just, you know, one of the things that there's a different word. There's one word that talks about my home nest, right? My home nest. Was you in it? Is talking about was you in it? Is talking about your home nest, the place where the baby is nested. And that is not necessarily talking, because that's when the baby is on the outside. Where is the baby nested on the outside? So that doesn't necessarily correlate to birth. That can be adoption. That can be all kinds of things. And then, you know, another word in Gitch is talking about connection in the internal in a cellular way. So that's about that birthing aspect. And then talking about the matriarch in regard to Nagwaskikdamik or Mahamigu or Mother Earth, which is the kind of that glue that holds us all together. You know, that foundational glue that holds us all together. And so all of those are different words for mother or mothering, and they all kind of have a different connotation. And so when we think about all of these different aspects that we're talking about those who give life, we're talking about those who mother as being, you know, distinct things, because fathers can provide mothering in a sense of nurturing, caring for, cultivating, protecting, you know, that where mothering has the way that we're using mothering in regard to the gift economy is really akin to our humanity, and that it's the loss of our humanity that the mothers have had to step in and fulfill that space that was left by that loss of our humanity. And so in that sense, mothering is really about reuniting with that same thing as we're talking about Mahamigu, that source energy, that glue that holds us together of Mother Earth. In this sense, the gift economy is bringing us back to that source, that glue of our humanity that holds us all together. So I think that was what I was talking about.
Sherry, can men do that kind of mothering at all the different levels too, or not?
Well, they definitely can't hold a being within their body, you know, and carry that being on a cellular level, other than carrying, well, you know, the sperm, that one aspect of it that helps to create the possibility of physical life being created. So men can't do that part, at least not yet. I mean, they keep messing with things and they'll probably be able to one day. But I've also seen a lot of predictions that eventually men will become extinct. And so, but the other pieces, yes, I think, definitely. Like, you know, there are very loving, mothering, nurturing men who raise the children on their own. There are men who hold the family together. You know, my grandfather was that kind of presence for me in my life. And he, you know, in our language, we have the word for heart is in the word for grandfather.
Yeah.
And what that represents for us in the language is that as the man ages and matures and grows and comes more into balance within his own being, he brings forward through relationship and having to balance with a partner, brings forward more of the heart-based wisdom of the divine feminine.
Yeah.
So when they reach old age and they become a grandfather, then they get to claim that aspect of that heart-based wisdom that's come forward in them through the guidance of the woman in the role of grandfather.
Cool. And is the word any different if a man is doing it?
We don't have, I'm sure that there are words for, let me think. I mean, I'm sure that we have words that, it's interesting because oftentimes the word for man or for male partner is essentially translates to the one who helps the woman.
Huh.
Because our language and our culture is very matrifocal. So it's the partner of and the one who helps and supports the woman.
How cool.
And so, but I'm sure if they really have time to think about it and talk about it, we could come up with some words relate to fathering. But those tend to be very external, practical, out in the world, because that's that masculine energy is about, engaging with the outside world. That feminine energy is about cultivating from within, intuitive wisdom, heart-based wisdom, that holds everyone together. Those kinds of things are all connected to the mother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Sherry, where we have a word where we take the word mother and we add in English motherhood or mothering, that's not the way the language works in your language, right? So when you're talking about when women are maturing, because the idea is, being childless doesn't mean you're less a woman. I think that's the context that's curious, within the culture itself, because most of the discussion has been around whether or not you are complete if you don't have a child.
Yeah, I mean, the whole structure of the society is different in that biological parents very rarely are responsible for, in the traditional sense, not as it is right now, but in the traditional sense, we're not the ones who did the day-to-day care for the children. It was the grandparents and the aunties and uncles. And so oftentimes the parents fulfilling their roles as aunties and uncles would spend more time with their siblings' children than their own children in their teaching role of whatever their skill set was, and the kids that came to them to be trained in that particular skill set. And so, there's a transitional line of care. And so those children who are being raised primarily by grandparents and aunties and uncles during their youth end up being the ones who care for them in their old age. And so it just, the way that it works out time-wise is, ideally to put people who are best situated to care for one another together in overlapping, weaving patterns. And so it wouldn't be looked at in the same terms that the society that we live in today is looked at, I guess, is the easy answer, because the society itself was different, and the ways that things were done traditionally were different. And so like, you know, when you were at Healing Turtle Island, everybody's kids were everybody's kids, right? They were just running around and whoever was there to take care of them took care of them in that moment. You know, we had to put up some boundaries around that because it was a mixed gathering, both Native and non-Native people alike. If it was just a Native gathering, those kids would know to respect any auntie that spoke to them. They would know to respect any uncle that spoke to them. And where we had a mixed gathering where there were both Native and non-Native people, the non-Native kids are like, I don't know you, you can't tell me what to do. So their parents had to have stricter boundaries around their kids because that culture is different for them. And so I really think it's a cultural thing, you know, as the long answer to your question, I guess.
That's really interesting because it fits in with the thing that Jen circulated a couple weeks ago about the grandmother hypothesis, that the grandmother taking care of the grandchild was important for the evolution of human beings.
Yeah, in the Filipino culture traditionally, and this is where it becomes complex because of the colonial and mostly the religious aspect, because the religion fixed generations and fixed the relationship of children and mothers and fathers. But they were multi-generational homes. Still in the United States, they're multi-generational. You don't think of taking care of your nephew or nieces as babysitting, or you don't think of a grandparent taking care of their children as babysitting, or a father taking care of a child as babysitting, you know, his own child. So the words are very, very different. And even today, young or people who work bring their parents to the United States as the carer for their children. So it's not called, you know, it's not called parenting, it's called caring. So the words about around how you care for the child. Now, where that relates to single or childless women who choose to not have children, like I said, I've shared before, my mother's youngest sister met her partner when they were in school at age 10. She was a distant cousin, probably like fourth or fifth cousin or something like that. And they had been together since they were 10. So they were together for more than like 70 or 80, probably for 70 years as same-sex partners. A word in the Filipino language for lesbian. They adopted children, but the fact that and they Catholic. So this is where, again, you know, the complexity of it, where you have to look at how the culture, the underlying culture supports our traditional values. So she was a very active part of the community because she worked at a civic level in the city. In our hometown, or our maternal hometown, which was the first mayor was from our family. So, you know, this is part of this idea that when looking at these questions, you know, for me, it's just normal, you know, how a woman gets to make a choice. Then, of course, you bring in colonialism, and there's the stigma of the culture, no abortions, you know, so you can't have that same freedom of sexuality and growing up as a human, you know, what it means to be a human animal in our full blossoming of our sensuality. But underlying that are all these other values. And I think that's the complexity. So to me, of course, a woman should be able to have a choice to be childless or to have children. And even if you do have children with a man because you wanted to have a child, because of course, in those days, and still probably monetary wise in the Philippines, you had to have sex with a male in order to have a child. The only way that you could have a child if you wanted to be a mother was to either have your own child or to adopt another child. But again, you're living in a multi-generational home. All of my families have compounds. So my grandparents' house was built on a piece of property. And then next door, when my mother's twin got married and had 7 children, they built a house right next door. And they shared the responsibilities of caring for all of those children. So in my grandmother's house, my auntie lived there with my grandmother and my grandfather, and the other house was my auntie and her children. Where my father lived in the village, the compound was created around the farmland, and each of the children built a house around the farmland to work the farm. So all the children would actually come and they would work the land, or they would have big meetings at the grandparents' house, but it's not formalized. I mean, this is part of the challenge, I think, that I understand Heidi was saying about mothering and this idea of lesbians. Are lesbians historical? Because many of the indigenous languages didn't have necessarily a word, because who you had sex with wasn't really your identity, if that makes any sense. Your identity as a human being was primary, and your contribution to the community was primary. Roles were shared. You didn't really have an identity as maybe a warrior, unless that was the primary thing that you did. But most often, the way that the cultural historian in the Philippines that I know says, we were required, we're island people. And so you had to learn everything to survive in your boat. Everybody had to learn how to work together in your boat, because if you went from this in a boat to another island to start a village, you had to take all the skills. So I think it's a different way of thinking, because it's about the village, and your identity as a woman isn't fixed in a role like it is in Western culture. I mean, I think that's the biggest challenge for me, anyways, because I'm listening and I'm learning a lot, but I'm perplexed at why there would be such a delineation. It doesn't make any sense, because we're female humans and we have the ability to have children, or we choose not to have children, and that is not a function of what it means to be a female. That's a function of what it means to be an animal. You know what I mean? There you go.
Yeah, I think, oh, I don't know. I can't hear anything anymore. Can people hear me? Because I all of a sudden can't hear anybody. All of a sudden.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay.
Anyway, just to say, I think I think there's that question that Letitia raised, and I think there's the kind of thinking of what it would be like if we didn't have these nuclear small bunkers within which it doesn't work. But I think another element of trying to look at this question in our current context is the fact that we're in a societies, and have been ever since exchange emerged as even a paradigm, where different decisions, different roles, different locations and histories is always measured against each other. I mean, even the concept that if you are a mother or not a mother, or if you're a male or a female, or if you're older or younger, one is worth less than the other, or one has less honor than the other. That is something that is so baked into us that we have all the complexities I've been talking about. We have all the different social structures that are more open to variety and less demanding, more human. But so it's that, like, I think to me, that separation from our humanity that Sherry mentioned, once we have a gender that is other than that and defined by being other and better, we've got both the gender and that kind of patriarchal imposition of a superior gender and being, which models on all the race and all the other differences. And we've got the mere fact of just always finding it impossible to look at difference without seeing hierarchy. So of course we can't think that a woman who does give birth and a woman who doesn't give birth, you got the misogyny. They're either way they're selfish, okay? Either way they're, demanding or a problem or whatever. But there's also one of them to use that now almost inbuilt judgment always. We're in that context. And then we're divided from each other. So the women who have children and stay home from work blame the ones who go out to work as being not good mothers. And the ones who are in the workforce reckon the ones at home are just lazy and, living off a man and not liberated enough. But so that to get right, it does get right back to basics on all those different ways. It's about gift and it's about exchange and patriarchy. And, so that, it's very sticky and it is very complex, and to disentangle it all. But to me, the gift, to be able to understand this in terms of we are all separated from our humanity and we are all human in all these different ways. And to hear about the cultures that could recognize the maternal and not mean that these were the rulers or everybody else was less than, or it's really hard to be able to understand that. And if Sherry's trying to write an article about it in a world where it's inconceivable, it's a challenge. And anyway, it's really exciting to talk about, and also I think so close to all our lives in terms of decisions or not decisions, or what we've lived and the way we've negotiated it. And anyway.
That's really interesting, Angela. I remember in 1975, I went to a conference for International Women's Year in Halifax, and we were divided up into tables. And the one I was at, the discussion question was, if you could be something other than what you are, what would you be? And the ones who were stay-at-home mothers said, well, gee, it would be nice to have a job. And the ones who were working said it'd be nice to stay at home and have kids. And there was a whole exchange about the advantages and disadvantages of those two lifestyles. And so I had a really good experience. And I was talking to somebody later who was at a different table. And there the discussion was, I forget, something along the lines of, what do you do? And so the mothers said, I'm a stay-at-home mother, and the working women said, I go out to work. And it turned out each one started to defend her own lifestyle and become defensive about her own lifestyle. And so the woman at that table had a really bad experience because it sort of set up that opposition that you're talking about.
Well, I think that's partly the process, you know, the storytelling, the starting from our experience and talking about that. That's a sort of a CR thing, which obviously
Yeah.
works differently in different cultures, but to try to get a space where people can ever be there with their humanity and see and hear each other and talk. And it does depend on the question, and it depends on how you start. It's very difficult in this world.
That's a
And
really good
1975,
story. That's a really good story. You need to put that in one of your books if you haven't already.
yeah, 1975, of course, was sort of the center of CR groups and gatherings. I think Linda was probably at that same conference, so I don't know what your memories of it are.
Which conference are you talking about, Judy?
It was at Mount St. Vincent, and it was an International Women's Year, and it was the conference where I met Louise Arden.
Okay, because we also did the conference at the Mount the following year. It was 76 rather than 75. Susan Clark and I organized that. And you, I think, helped give some funding to it as part of whatever job you had.
Quite possibly. It was the theme was why not, and I remember writing a big essay about it afterwards and saying that was not a very good theme, and I was wrong. I now think it was a very good theme, but I didn't like it. I thought it was too tame at the time.
Yeah, I actually liked it at the time because I think, or at least, and certainly subsequent. So I probably was. I mean, I was at most of the feminist things that happened that year. So it was probably different from the '76 conference, which had a broader. It was more Canadian. We invited Canadians, and then we had about 500 people which also from the community on the Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, you and with Manpower and Immigration or whatever it was called at the time, supported that one, the second one.
I'm reminded that there are several people who haven't checked in. So Suzette, do you want to check in?
No, I'm just listening. Thanks.
And Mary Claire, is there someone with you who wants to check in?
Yeah, she's just making tea. This is Melissa, who's been really doing her wonder in the gardens, but I'll let her check in. Thank you, Judith.
Hi, my name is Melissa, and I've been around the Goddess Temple for about 7 years now, and it's been a few years since I came back, and I was drawn to come here, and I'm really super loving all the beautiful discussion, and I'm learning a lot. And I'm just grateful to be here. And I just started planting, and we have little shoots growing up already. So life is beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, Jen?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that of course, choosing to be a mother or not is fairly recent because of the birth control possibilities that we have now and we didn't have before. Although I know there are other ways of doing it, maybe indigenous people had ways of doing it, but I just wanted to mention that.
One of the sections in my chapter of this book is about methods of birth control that were known even in antiquity. Some that we probably wouldn't be too keen on right now, like putting animal dung as a spermicide, and then some others. There were other plant-based, both for contraception and for abortion, to bring about abortion. So it wasn't easy, and it was probably fairly messy, but there were birth control methods that were
Hey, buddy.
that were known, but you know, the pill really made a difference. Yes, I totally agree that the pill made a difference to women's role.
If I can jump here briefly, I was just thinking, Judith, about your chapter and your discussion of some of these things. And then this topic made me realize I would often joke to people that as the youngest of 7 children, but also, so I have my sister's the oldest and there are 5 boys in between and I'm the youngest, but the 6 of them are in 8 years and I'm 8 years younger. So my mother was actually 45 when she had me, and in many ways fulfilled kind of a grandmotherly role. So that part was interesting. But I also joke about the fact that in the war of Roman Catholics try to get progressive, the argument between my parents was, of course, about birth control. And so I joke about how I was the product of, what do you call parents? No, what do parents who practice rhythm have? And it's children. But actually, it's interesting to think about, beyond that being a silly anecdote, perhaps, is the fact that I grew to realize over time that although both of my parents have passed on now, I discovered that I really was the product of probably the only deceitful thing that my mother ever did, which was to sort of lie to my father in an oblique way about where she was on her period so that she could have me. So it was a really interesting way of her having reclaimed, even though she outwardly looked like the subservient, sort of docile woman, that her act of radical emancipation from the patriarchal sort of powers that she was under was to go out of her way to actually have me, which I thought was pretty interesting. Now that wasn't the question I was going to ask, although it seems strangely related. Sherry's mentioning here the moving beyond the binary, and we've talked about the role of the grandmother as Genevieve's the article that she passed around. I'm curious for any of you, and Judith, this started when I was rereading your chapter. As you start to question and recontextualize the Hebrew Bible and some of the narratives about the women and the role that they played and how they were viewed relative to bearing children or not bearing children, being married or not being married, I wonder if that extends, or for me, it extends into some questions that I've had about the New Testament versions, especially relative to some of the Essene Gospels, the fragments of which have only recently been released in the last 2 years, where what we had once thought was a maternal or a womanly role, either harlot or virgin or mother of God, the fact that there are these stories about Saint Marie de la Mer, the 3 Marys, and that place in southern France where it is said that the 3 Marys came, it suddenly extends the possibility that this maternal role, as in midwifing, the possibility extends to sister, partner, and aunt. And I'm curious how that connects to some of what Sherry was talking about in more of the indigenous understanding and cosmology of the role of women and the maternal beyond the binary. And in this case, also beyond the binary of child-free or childbearing, but maternal in all of these ways, including a sort of gender expansive understanding. those are some of the many things that are bubbling up for me as I listen to these various contributions.
Well, I always thought that Jesus was a feminist, and his words got turned around by the early writers about his life. And just as a brief aside, the whole question of original sin is not in the Hebrew Bible. It's an interpretation. It's a Christian interpretation of the Adam and Eve story. In which if you actually look at the actual text, there's nothing about being sinful.
Right.
When there's a lull, I can tell you a story that's going to be in the Women Rise Wild book about a realization about one of our stories connected to the Adam and Eve story.
I absolutely love how Robin Wall Kimmerer's stories of the creation story relates to the Adam and Eve story. There's such a stark contrast. So why don't you go ahead, Sherry, and then we'll ask Peggy to check in once she's been here for a few minutes.
One of the things that we've been doing a lot of work to decolonize our stories, and things that we realized is that we saw at a certain point in time a marked shift between the stories as they were originally and the stories as they began to be told within a certain time period. And there was one story in particular that really was disturbing to me. I sat with it for a long time. I carried it into ceremony, into the women's lodge with me, and prayed about it. And then I had a realization, and we actually have verification of this happening, where the elders changed the story as a warning. So those who were familiar with the story would know that there was a hidden message within the new story as it was told. And so the original story of one of our heroes in our mythology, Glooskap, is Gabi was connected to Muldoon, who is the feminine. So it was masculine and feminine twins that were born, and that Muldoon is connected to the bleeding time of the woman. It's about the ability to create life. And later stories, it becomes Glooskap and Mulsum, M-O-L instead of M-U-L. And Mulsum becomes the evil twin and a black wolf. And so we see the transition in that story come in around the time that the missionaries sweeping through our territory. And the story shifted from both of them being born in a very, natural way to the Glooskap becomes born out of the earth. And Mulsum cuts open the side of the mother and crawls out, killing the mother. And so what I realized one day when I was in ceremony, and I had this, I've been carrying the story around with me, was that was one of the stories that was changed. So we went back to find the original stories. It was a warning that when we shift from our original stories of balanced masculine and feminine to the patriarchal story of woman coming out of the rib of man, when woman comes out the side, that kills the mother, and it killed the matricultural and matrifocal nature of our communities. And that was a time when the church infiltrated the matriarchy within our communities and really violently attacked it. And so, there's also that within the tradition of the storytelling that I think is there's messages in there for us about those transition periods and what they represent for us as communities, what they represent for us as societies, and what that represented from us adopting that story of life coming out of the rib of man rather than coming naturally out of the woman was the killing of our matriculture, the killing of the mother within our, as a central being within our communities. So anyway.
That's really interesting because that goes way back pre-biblical to the annihilation, the killing of Tiamat, the children of so the story of the children killing the mother is a very much older than the Hebrew Bible.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, when we think about moving from matriarchy to patriarchy and the symbolism of the children, the ones who are coming after, shifting from matriarchy to patriarchy, that children killing the mother, I mean, there's so much in that. Yeah.
Okay, I see that we've got some new people, so let's flip back to check in. Leah, Peggy, and Paula, which one of you wants to start?
I'm happy to go ahead. Yeah. Hi everybody, haven't seen you for a few weeks. So I was just interested in what Sherry said there because that part of the book of Genesis always grated on me. It comes, I remember as well reading something, is it Genesis 16 or something? I don't know, but there's a section there where it talks about Adam, you know, the men decide to create women then so they can marry their sons to the women. It's just, when I was reading that section, that particular paragraph, I just said it's out of kilter with the rest of the text. Like it's something that the people writing it kind of knew wasn't really the real story. It's like contrived or something. Whereas, you know, there's other parts of the book of Genesis that kind of flow like poetry or whatever, but that particular part seems to come out from a very controlling part of the human mind anyway, that they kind of want things to be like this, even though it's not like that. So it's just, I've never really understood what kind of mindset that came out of. It might have come out of a mindset of pressure or feeling the need to control or something, but it's not in sync with the mindset of other passages in the thing. I just, you know, it's interesting to me. But anyway, I was only slowly catching up on the thing from last week with Judith, the work that Judith is involved in. I'm very interested in that. I'd love to hear more. The only other thing I want to say just right now is that I'll try to send you a link to it. It's hard for me to send it on the Zoom, but it's interesting. Our president today, given that it's St. Patrick's Day, came out with some statements which you might find interesting. He said that our society needs to focus on a new respect for Mother Earth and awareness of her shared vulnerability. And he said that mankind has to shift away from the hubris, the arrogance, and the vanities of domination, strategies which have left us the legacy of lost communality and our planet in danger, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so he gave an interesting speech today that was redolent of some of Jen's work. And in fact, when the conference was going to be in Ireland here last August, we had asked him to chair it and everything. So it's good to hear a president use those words anyway. So
wow, it's revolutionary.
Thanks, Leah. Peggy, would you like to check in?
Yes, well, first of all, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that the time had changed. So I'm just catching up. And I just want to say, I don't know the discussion that happened before, so I'll just say I'm happy to be here. So you're starting an hour earlier, right?
Well, right. Just a note, it's until March the 28th. People who are in Europe, and I guess also you, Peggy, and probably Angela, are an hour behind. You haven't actually shifted daylight savings time. So in Europe, it happens on the 28th of March. And for the United States and some of us, it happened last weekend. So we're an hour difference.
When you go forward, then that means, because I don't change.
Oh,
means that
that means that you've been already an hour?
Yes,
So,
we've been here for an hour.
Been
yeah,
already
that's
for
fine.
an hour. Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that that we have to go back to 11 o'clock my time.
Yeah.
In the notice that I sent out last night, I think I had the times were there, and the only one that was different you would see was for Rome, because our time would be the same because in the States, because we actually use that as the reference point for daylight savings time. It happened for us.
Oh, I didn't
think
realize that you. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that you have already changed. So obviously, o sea, last weekend you changed. So on Monday you enter earlier anyway. You didn't go 1 hour earlier. So
That's
that is
right.
11. That is 11 o'clock my time.
Right. And it's only this way until the 28th of March, because I think many other people change on the 28th of March. Well, it depends on what Colombia does for daylight savings time.
No, we don't change. We don't change anything at all.
Well, if you don't change, then you'll be an hour off until we change back again.
All right, yeah, we will be an hour away until September. Or I don't know when is it that you change again for winter time.
Right. In the notice that I sent out, I did put in Pacific Daylight Savings Time.
Yeah, I didn't quite get
that gets sent out. But I changed the time for Rome to be 5 p.m. because I knew it was different there, and I changed it to say daylight savings time. I should have put an asterisk there. So that'll be true for Saturday and our next salon, which is on the 27th. So it will still not have synced up again.
Yeah, but anyway, Colombia is not going to. I mean, we don't change at all because we are in the tropics. We are 12 hours day and night every day of the year.
Like Peggy.
Yeah, yes. All right, like Peggy, yes, exactly. So basically, so today I am 1 hour late on this meeting.
You're just on time, Angela. Would you like to check in since you're talking right now?
Okay, well, I didn't say how much I enjoyed the conference of Mickey Cashton, and I can't remember the name of the person from India.
Menassi.
Menassi?
Yeah.
Menassi, of Mickey and Menassi. And somehow, I mean, they are sort of interesting sort of experiments, I think, in a way. But what I feel is that I think we need real sort of, I mean, we need to be able to link all these experiments as though to the gift economy. So that say, for instance, we talk about the gift economy, we could say, point out these experiments, or these are the things, because if we leave it in general that everybody in the world is doing gift economy, I don't think I mean, I don't think we go, what shall I say? I mean, people are looking for sort of things, you know, you can point out, because people asking, what is the gift economy? Yes, but tell me where do you practice it and what happens? No, pues the thing is that everybody doing the gift economy every day of their lives. So somehow every time one tries to communicate with people, intellectual people, I mean, whichever, you know, even the women from the feminist movement, that where do you, what are the examples of the gift economy? So what I think in a way, all these conferences are very interesting and all that, but I think we have to try to round up so that we can put them within the sphere of the gift economy. I don't know where I made myself clear.
Thank you. I think I'm not sure, but I think Mickey is part of the International Feminists for the Gift Economy already on the website. She may be, I'm not sure. But thanks, Angela. Judith, I'm going to give it back to you. I think the only person who hasn't checked in is Paula. And Peggy. No, Peggy did check in. Oh, she did? Okay. Yeah, just a very short hello. Okay.
Did Peggy arrive in time, or did she also get lost like me?
Yeah. She was lost like you. You're not lost. You're perfectly on time.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. Can I go?
Paula?
Yes.
It's my fault also for Peggy because I ran home to be in time for 6 o'clock because we didn't change. So I assumed that you might change, but not us. So I told Peggy that it was at 6 o'clock. So forgive me, Peggy. So yeah, as I'm so late, I check in just saying hi, I'm happy to be here and I enjoyed the salon very much too. And we talk later. And I bought your book, Judith. I was able to buy it online.
Good. I'm happy to support the publisher because she does really good work, and publishing is not a terribly lucrative these days. Okay, well, are we ready to jump back into the discussion? Where did we leave off, or does somebody want to start a new thread? Because is there another direction that somebody wants to go in?
Well, I wanted to hear a little bit more about the topic, Judith, that you were talking about last week. And I was curious about some of the other roles that you mentioned that women have. I was thinking about, what's her name? Deborah was a judge. And I was wondering, was she childless? And do you think that she was in mothering in any way, or was gift giving in any way, or was there something feminine about her, or did she lose her role?
Deborah, we don't know if she had children or not. It doesn't say, so probably not, because if she did, it would probably say so. She was she was a judge, but she was also a military leader, and she encouraged the military, the general, to go off to war, and he said, I won't go off to war unless you come with me, and so she went with him, and so she was sort of the military leader of the campaign. And she is called a mother in Israel, but her role was not compassionate, taking care of people. She was, I think she's the one who mocked Sisera's mother, the mother of the opposing general, was waiting for him to come home, and she didn't know that he was dead, and they Deborah and Yael mocked her for her motherly concern. So no, her role was definitely not what we would think of as maternal.
Jen has her hand up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think it's also that we wash the mothering out of all of the other roles in society. So we don't see, for example, a judgment that a judge might do in terms of satisfying a need, which would be according to gifting, because gifting is satisfying a need. And so you could even interpret not only compassionate judging, but the judging that satisfies a need of a right judgment as a gift. And so I just am saying everything is mothering. There are some distortions of mothering that are exchange And so that is not mothering because it's distorted mothering. But that means everybody is mothers. That's what I'm trying to say.
There's also, I'm blanking on her name, but that she's certainly gifted. She was asked to validate a biblical scroll, and she did, and she did it in her own right, and not in the name of her husband, and I'm blanking on her name, and so that was certainly a gift. So if you look at that sort of thing as gifting, then there's examples of gifting. Helping people when they need it. David's first wife, the first wife of King David, whose name was Michal or Michal, her father was after David and wanted to kill him, and she hid him and covered for him while he jumped out the window. So whether she had children or not is actually the text said that she didn't, and then later on in the text it talks about her children, and the usual interpretation is that she mothered her sister's children, that they weren't her own. Let's see. Vashti, I don't know how you could, is that a gift? Vashti was the king asked her to, she was the wife of the king, and he asked her to dance naked in front of his drunken friends, and she said no. Is that a gift? Is the, saying, standing up for yourself and saying no, do you want to count that as a gift?
What do you think, Jen?
I think that it's refusing an exchange.
Okay, I'll go for that. Huldah the prophet, the wife of Shalom, is asked to validate the biblical scroll. These are all in the biblical text, and so that was another role that again, we don't know if she had children, so if she did, it was not here it was not in the text. One of the things about Deborah, by the way, is that she is introduced as Eshet Lapidot. And Eshet Lapidot has for many years been translated as the wife of Lapidot. But it could also be translated as woman of flames, or woman of torches, which could mean fiery woman or even possibly redhead.
Can I mention about this thing about everything being in relation to everything being mothering? I think I can remember two stories of really learning. That's true for male roles as well. And that's when we don't see, there aren't the words for recognizing that. And I remember, and I might have told this story before here because it struck me so much. I remember when Barbara Mann spoke in Rome, and she was talking about the American, the process more in the East when US government troops were going out and just decimating native villages, clearing them. And the warriors, in that context where they were bringing rumbling big guns through the forests, and there was not going to be any defending of those settlements in a military way. The job of the warriors, and she said, this is, the warriors are the protectors, you know, and that's mothering. That's the, and she talked about the role in that context would be to go to the top of the trees and watch for the guns approaching, and then the warriors carried the elders and the children up the mountain or around, you know, out of the way, and that was the warriors' task in a context like that. And I remember also being in Texas at a conference, hearing I think Haida speak about matriarchy and these principles. And then of course comes the question, well, how could matriarchy ever become patriarchy? Originally, this is before you have patriarchies in certain places that are riding roughshod over the earth. And you know, she said, well, there's numbers of different, you know, theories about this, but one theory is during times of real scarcity, there wasn't enough for the village, for the community, so the men went away. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, why would the men go away when there isn't enough? That's typical of men, you know. And the point was that the important people who should have what was there was the women and children. You know, the men went away. The men in a context of matriarchy went away. But of course, once they're out of sight, you never know what they get up to. And then they aren't in that context anymore, and they aren't being appreciated and loved and recognized with the role, et cetera, et cetera. So there's recognizing what and being able even to understand male contributions maternally. You know, it's interesting. I just a few years ago, I got I had a whole lot of different experiences and realized or got a terminology for men who still manage to be motherly and overtly so and unapologetically so in an unthreatened way in our context. And I call them motherly men. And there's ones who stop to help you change your tire when you're on the side of the road, that jump up to help in every way. And they get a bad rap sometimes for being patronizing or whatever. But there's more of them, I think, in rural contexts where you still have male and female, their roles mean something in terms of, you know, sustaining and everything. But there's quite a few who just are just that way so much that they can still be motherly, but it's really hard for males, I think, especially young men, to act like that. But anyway, yeah, it's just.
Jen, is your hand still up from before, or do you want to speak again? Oh, okay, I see it's gone.
Yeah.
Who's next? Who haven't we heard from?
I could say maybe those men that left went to rob another village.
Yes, but I think it wouldn't, you know, I mean, who knows how this whole thing happened way back then, but
Really?
But I think outside of a context of where, I mean, all the very, very significant, really sophisticated ways that in those matriarchal, the one you read about them, you hear about them, and you learn more about them, the processes that make men recognize men's importance in those societies. I mean, you know, in the Iroquois, where you have all the men or the council, but they have to be chosen by the women and they have to report back. And even the topics that they raise, what gets on the agenda is all provided for them. And there are really significant, obviously, and they're all born into families where they know they have a role. They're a part of it. They're loved. They don't have to construct a kind of an artificial family and become the head of it and, you know, find a place and keep a place and, you know, juggle this thing with all the economics on their back and everything. So, but once they're out of that context, then, you know, you can understand why things would, but even, yeah, but so Jen, are you thinking that when the men left, that the men would have already been predatory when they left their matriarchal, when they left the women with the food and they went off, or didn't they have to learn it, or didn't some of them have to kind of be impressive, and didn't the those, you know, those kind of characteristics go unchecked, or what were you suggesting?
Oh, I just was saying that was a possibility when they went off by themselves, but you know, there was the whole Kurgan invasion and all of that.
But they are, but how did they turn out to be that way? How did they get that way in the first place?
There's Frida.
Frida has her hand up, Judith. Frida, can you unmute?
Yeah.
Yeah. I gave a talk at one of our events some time ago that was referred to a book that a friend of Suzette's had written. It was called something like The Descent of Religion. I have it in a shelf downstairs. But one of the things that she hypothesized about this Kurgan invasion and so forth was that in these matricentric communities, if there were men who were too violent, that those men would be expelled from the community. And so they went off to start their own community, and they wanted to have women, so they went and stole women from the other community, and that this was the beginning of this patriarchal society. And just in relation to that, I'll mention that there was an event that I recorded at, I think, National Women's, I can't remember which conference it was at now, but there was an Inuit woman who said that in the old days, in her community, when there were men who were violent and couldn't be convinced otherwise, that the other men would kill those men. And the difference between killing that type of person when it emerges and sending them somewhere else to gather together could have long historical implications.
The impression I got was that there were never that many, and it's very hard to survive alone, especially in the north. But you know, they were cultures that needed each other. But yeah, it's a big.
Yeah.
Heidi has written a book about it that's not been translated into English, but evidently it's a very thorough book about the beginning.
Jen, do you know the name of it in German? No.
No.
Okay. Well, we'll check with her. Did I
see? Seems to be something as well about. I mean, as somebody mentioned there, there's this notion that you can have the lone wolf or whatever who is violent and the community expels them. But as Jen pointed out, or as Angela pointed out, or both of you, usually people would only survive in groups. So you'd have like a gang of maybe violent men. It just to be something that occurs regularly in history and is still, unfortunately, a kind of a role model, a negative role model out for young men there today. But there seems to be also something in men where they see, you know, women or children or people belong to another group as not human. You know, they can be protective of their tribe, and then someone from another tribe is the other. It's the us and them thing. And I'm not sure that women do that to the same extent. You know, that men will be part of a coalition and then they'll see it as fair game to attack another group, sometimes even plundering for their own group, you know. So there's something really big there in terms of not being able to see the humanity of other groups. I don't know, but
This
Yeah,
gang thing is happening now. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Judith.
That's okay, Frida. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that that this gang thing is happening now. Some examples in Cameroon, in the area where the Anglophile area where there was struggle. Now it's become a kind of roving gang warfare that's going into communities and destroying everything, and that has caused huge problems in that part of the world. And similar things are happening in a lot of places. I mean, if you have young men who are not socialized into community, or they're socialized to a destructive habit, I mean, they just go on a rampage. And it seems to be a phenomenon among humans in various places. Oh, same thing in Haiti. I just saw a film recently. We're doing a Wings show about it. The young men burned the marketplace and destroyed what the market women had spent years building up. I mean, they didn't really want to be in the market in the first place. The government made them go to the market, and then the young men just burned the whole thing down. So, yeah, it's very dangerous to have young men who are not socialized.
So a lot of what we're talking about is the whole concept of othering, either othering the men, othering different societies, people othering women without children, the whole concept of how we interact with things that we're either not familiar with or somehow feel that they're a threat.
Jen and Angela, then Angela.
Okay. Well, in writing about the gift economy and how giving satisfies needs and is transitive, I unfortunately see also that hitting is very similar to giving, because it crosses the interpersonal space, it touches the other person, and it establishes a relationship. Gifting establishes a positive mutuality and so forth, and hitting establishes power over. And it's a long-term relationship, and it can be recreated every time the other person doesn't do what you want them to. So I'm afraid that hitting is also like a spin-off. It's like exchange. It's a spin-off of giving. And not only hitting also fits in with exchange, because then you have an exchange of blows, the other person hits back, and you have establishing an equation between the two. So it's kind of a prefiguring of market exchange in a way. And so we had gifting previous to the market, and the gifting that was created also among different groups, even the European groups of patriarchy, in which the heads of the town or whatever would gift to others and have hospitality and all of those things. But at the same time, there was also this marauding and battle that was going on, and plunder of the gifts of the stuff of other people, the village or the town of the other people, and bringing it back to nurture that village or their own place. So unfortunately, we have these two ways, one of giving, and the other, which is maternal and matriarchal, and the other, which is hitting, and exchange, and the two between them, there is a creation of a sort of a balance. But of course, it's never right, because the balance is actually parasitic of the exchange part on the gift part. And so it's a complicated puzzle to try to figure out. And well, I just thought that I should tell you that side of the question. And there's gifting has to be extracted not only from the market, but also be seen as the standard or the answer, and certainly not hitting. So what happens is, I guess you have to have a matriarchal society that will impose gifting instead of violence.
I love the idea of imposing gifting. That's
well,
that's a very interesting juxtaposition.
I know that cracked me over too. It's a power over law.
Yes, you must gift. Okay, yes. I'm sorry. That was just a very interesting. Angela,
I'm right there with you, Letitia.
Angela Dolmich.
Yeah, I have. Well, I'm sorry, but I have to bring back the experience of Nachira with men. Basically, originally, the houses were all in the name of the women, and by the constitution of Nachira, only women can own the houses, and also they are. I mean, the board and everything is managed by women, and all the different businesses are in the name of the women, which happen there. And when people of Nachira ask what is the function of men, they say they help us, but they don't take. They have got used to take the decisions. Obviously, when we started Nachira, there were some men, especially there was a specific case of a man who used to beat his wife every 15 days when he got his pay, because he got drunk and he used to beat her. And he had done that for many years. And in fact, at one moment, he didn't move originally, but then she moved, and then he moved with her. And then he came drunk one day and one weekend. And he, we sort of stopped him coming to the main door, so he came through the back door. He actually broke a fence and went there and made a big scandal to her and started to threaten her with a machete. So they called the police, and anyway, the man went away. Then the next day, we called him to what they call it's like a social sort of committee of women. And he came there, and he was being very, well, he was telling everybody how good he was, and how many women he had, and that he had all these many women, and he had 30 children. Or with this woman there, he had 7 children, and then he had all those. And anyway, we told him that was not the way for Nachira, and that he had to make up. Like people who commit faults in Nachira, they don't have to pay fines, but they have to do something. So he had to plant some trees as a punishment, or he had to do that. And he said okay, but he couldn't do it. He wouldn't do it again. What happened was that 15 days later, again he came back drunk, and then and this woman, who had been terrified of throwing him out because she felt that she wouldn't be able to survive with her 7 children, she finally accepted that this man should be thrown out of the community. And in fact, that is what we did. We threw him out of the community. And another man who went after little girls also was thrown out of the community, and that has been almost 17 years ago. And the men, they are young men also. Violence has been completely eradicated from Nachira, because obviously, obviously, it's just not part of the philosophy of the eco village. I say, for instance, that men who have grown up in Achira, of course, there are quite a few of them now, have a different sort of philosophy completely. And they have accepted that this is a community ruled by women. On the other hand, the fact that it is a community that is managed, ruled by, or no, I won't say ruled, but I mean, where women are the ones who take the decisions, that the houses are in the name of the women, that they are the property owners, has made it be very difficult to scale it, because every time we propose this, for instance, we propose this for the guerrillas housing efforts in the peace process, but they never wanted to accept it, because the fact that they didn't want to accept that the property should be in the hands of that the women should be the owners, the property should be in their hands rather than in the hands of men. So, and that they would be the ones who took the decisions. I mean, so much so that when Heidi was there, and I think I already told you that, they proposed to Heidi, some men got together and said to Heidi that they were not very happy because they were relegated to a second place. And then Heidi suggested that why didn't we have a council of men that could advise them? And when we proposed this to the whole community, they say, no, thank you. We have made a great effort to be where we are, and we are not interested in them coming to counsel us. I mean, when we need them, they are very kind and they help us. In fact, every year for Father's Day, we give like a prize to the man who has helped most, and who has been given his time or whatever, and that's that. So in a way, well, that is just like a practical example of what can happen, and what happened to the men that left. Well, one of them obviously started a new family, and I imagine in outside Nachira, obviously, and I presume that he continued with his bad habits of hitting women. I mean, as part of his way of seeing life. But in Nachira, that doesn't happen, and it stopped happening completely.
Thanks, Angela. A little bit far afield of the choice of children and being motherless to now talking about violent men. That's a little far afield. So I just want to point that out.
But it's still on the question of othering. It's still on the question of how we treat people who may have different ideas of the good life than ours.
Yes, and from the point of view of othering, for me, what I'm noticing in the conversation is that there is a bit of scarcity. Mm-hmm. There's a fear of not enough attention, not enough resources, not enough control. And so the individual becomes violent for attention, or because they want to, like what Jen was in this transitive way, crossing a boundary, since they're not getting the gifts they deserve, they feel they deserve, then they're going to take them, become violent. But this idea of a woman choosing to have children or not have children, or the idea that she is any less than, in my view, because I think that was a place that Sherry was a point that Sherry brought up the last time, which is, how do we language people who do not birth children are not feeling othered?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, Letitia, and particularly since it's what we are advocating is called the maternal gift economy. And so how to language the fact that maternal doesn't mean biological, only your biological descendants.
Hi, I just wanted to add something because it fits here. Suzette was here and she's already left again, but I'd like to give an example of her as someone who is, one might almost say militantly child-free. That's why she checked in on this, because she's very interested in that subject. But on the other hand, during her life, she's been partnered with several women who had sons. And on two different occasions, after she split up with those women, they were separated, the sons, the women sent their son to come and live with Suzette because, and she socialized them to how to live with other people. So, what you do to be living in a situation with somebody else. And it was easier to come from her, who was not their mother, than their mother sometimes. And I think that that's a very important form of mothering when you're not the mother. And I'll just add that even situations where sometimes, like if I'm in the grocery store and I see a child having a fit and the mother is trying to do something, I'll just walk up and I'll speak directly to the child and just let the child know that other people are looking at them and that seeing them as a person. And sometimes that's all the intervention that's required to end the situation. So there's a kind of drive-by mothering that can happen too.
Love that phrase, drive-by mothering.
And I like the notion of militant child free. That's something that I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
Mary Claire, do you have something to offer?
No, I'm sorry. I'm laughing at the collection of funny phrases that we've got going on here. It's actually sort of lovely because as we entertain the verbiage here, we're entertaining the paradox, and often in the paradox resides, the middle ground that is the mystery place that does break the binary of othering. So I'm cracking up, but it also feels like a bit of a cosmic comic joke on us,
Yes, and I think it shows, generational orientation, the context of a generation that I don't have a relationship to, because, being militant child-free is very interesting because there's a group of Filipino women in Canada who created a sisterhood, and they co-mother. So, and they're culturally, they're reclaiming their cultural roots. So they have a tribe that is ensuring that the children are being raised with Filipino values, but they raise their children together.
Well, I've
regardless
certainly known
of
women
choice.
who are militantly child-free. Sorry.
How do you relate the militant child-free with breastfeeding?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
And how did you relate? In the gift economy, one of the metaphors is the fact that the mother breastfeeds the child, and that the child receives this gift, and the mother doesn't ask for anything back. It is a sort of metaphor, but if you actually put it together with the militant child-free attitude, and then how do you relate the two things?
And that's actually a real issue, and one that I think would be the subject for another discussion, because what I would say is it relates to not to your descendants, but to your own mothering, to how your parents, how your mother related to you rather than how you relate to your children. And there are many people whose mothers did not relate to them in a maternal way. and I think that's the subject for another discussion, is how do we talk, what is the language around maternal gift economy for people who do not have a happy experience of a maternal, a long time maternal type relationship.
Judith, Sherry's video is off, but she texted me and would like to speak.
Okay.
And then Jen.
Okay.
Welcome back to my kitchen, everyone. This is not a cooking show, I promise. So one of the things that strikes me about these conversations is that, you know, all of this is really about the confinement and denial of natural roles emerging within communities, within families, within societies. It's the suppression and the denial of the natural, authentic emergence of individuals within the society. And that suppression of those roles, the suppression of the capacity for people to live beyond a binary is shifting now. We're seeing that shifting within society. And I had written earlier in the comments that for us in our communities, we have right now still, I'm sure we've lost some, but we have 5 recognized gender identities. And you know, there's also very specific roles within the community, you know, that have been assigned to people who are within each of those roles. And we also have, you know, a mechanism for identifying what an individual's gift is and not identifying them based on any gender until they reach a certain age where their spirit emerges and you can see who they are. And so when we're talking about all of this stuff, what we're talking about is a symptom of a bigger problem. We can't get to the problem unless we address the underlying cause of those symptoms. Jen is asking what the 5 gender identities are. And so there's multiple roles for each identity that we don't have time to get into in a few minutes, but woman born into a woman's body identifying as a woman, born into a male body identifying as a man, what's perceived as being a woman's body and identifying as male, being born into a male body identifying as female, and then true two-spirit. And so none of that has to do with sexuality at all. It's purely identifying which spirit comes forward in the body that you're born into. It's not really looking at it biologically. It's looking at it from a spiritual perspective. Which spirit comes forward and is most pronounced within your being? And so those are the identifications that we've made. But really, when you strip all that away, there's really just a recognition of what is the balance of masculine and feminine that exists within this being's body that's best suited to their particular purpose, and honor that. So, you know, the loss of that identification and the suppression and oppression that has been imposed upon us, largely by religion, is really the disruptive factor here that underlies all of the symptoms that we're talking about in relation to mothering and othering. And I just felt like that needed to be said. So thank you for that opportunity. I'm going to go back to.
Yeah. Jen, did you have something you wanted to offer right now?
I just wanted to say that we also learn a lot from children. I learned a lot from my children, from having children, from birthing them and bringing them up and then, you know, nursing them and everything. I think, you know, that taught me about the gift economy, really. And I realized that it was work. and it was different from the work that my ex-husband was doing. And it was not recognized at all. So you know, in my personal life, I made sort of that transition. And I just wanted to say that because you can be child-free, that's fine, but it also, if you are, and we're in our capitalist society, maybe it would be good for people to have a chance to learn from some children, to borrow some other people's children.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I just wanted to say, there's many languages in the Philippines, and we've had waves of influence. But from my mother's region, while our creation story includes the emergence of fully formed male and female, the language itself doesn't require or doesn't impose a masculine and feminine orientation, meaning that human characteristics are only translated into masculine and feminine when it's in English. The language itself identifies characteristics as being those things that are the tools or the assets of what it means to be our humanity. And the language, the primary language that my mother speaks, which is Waray, doesn't fixate that, and in the consciousness doesn't impose this idea that everything has to be balanced in that way. There's a harmony, but there's not this idea of fixing roles or fixing an ideology, which allows for this notion that where we have our sexuality or where we have an identity isn't doesn't diminish our humanity. Whatever your gender is or whatever your role is in the community requires you to be first and foremost an upstanding human being. And part of being an upstanding human being is to be able to have the qualities and the roles of contributing to the family, of caring and sharing and addressing the needs of the family, regardless of whether or not your brother, sister, the birth mother, the grandmother. I mean, all of these things are focused around what it means to actually raise a child. So, I think we tend to generalize that there's this idea of everybody thinks a certain, or each culture or indigenous cultures would, because I can only speak for this one little area of my mother's, and also from my father's area, which also has that similar thing, although some are much more influenced by Catholicism, so it's hard to tease it apart. And I'm grateful that now, these days, that's what's happening, is to find out, what is at the root, because there have been so many influences to the language. And I think I understand from Sherry, that's what her people are also doing. So I just wanted to just infuse that, because I don't want us to get fixed again in the assumption that to be human means that you have to have this masculine and feminine notion. It isn't, it doesn't even, I don't even quite feel that at all. So that's just, my 2 cents.
Okay, see Paula's hand up.
Jen also. No, I don't know who was first. Jen, you want to speak? You are before me, I think. Can you hear me?
Why don't you go ahead and then we'll
go ahead. I don't want to speak. I don't want to speak.
You have the hand up. Anyway.
No, I just didn't take it down.
I'm a kind of lost because the connection from the book that I tried to read to this discussion, I lost it. But I think what Sherry and Letitia are saying are very interesting, because the discussion, I mean, the militancy of not having children, let's put it that way, the affirmation of have the right to be child-free, which is the core of this book, basically, that is a product of a certain society, like, you know, the Western, I would say, in general, for sure, Europe and North America, where the having children was a duty, and you were not a woman if you didn't have children, basically. So it was an affirmation of freedom in that context, where there was masculinity roles and feminine roles, and every society in a way or another, apart perhaps these indigenous that are in reality more complex and we don't know, have these models. Now, what you and Sherry say is out from this non-freedom context, right? So my question I have a question. Is these 5 genders, or in a way, real more freedom of playing the personality of who one person is, not in a gendered concept? You see that as giving women, the real women, more autonomy, freedom, whatever we can, power, or, you know, possibility to express themselves out of the constriction of some rules? Because also, Sherry, when you say natural, I would like you to dig a moment about this natural, because natural is to give birth also, and to have that power and that limitation in our perception. So I would like to ask you, where are the good results of this different conception on women's lives?
I think that we, you know, that this is really a fundamental worldview difference. That that even talking about women with an expectation of what that means attached to it is colonial language. It's binary language, it's repressive language. And so when we think about, if we can strip away from our minds, right, the concept of man and woman as it's been drilled into us for centuries, and we can start thinking about human beings and thinking about every human being a combination of divine masculine and divine feminine energy, and seeing which energy rises up within them as their children, then we start to get just a little bit closer to the worldview difference that I'm talking about. And so when I'm talking about natural, it's what rises up within that body as a result of the combination of masculine and feminine energy that they carry. And so if that means that we're born into a body that is biologically capable of giving birth, what are the expectations that we have of the requirements of that body based on how we've been conditioned to believe, as opposed to looking deeper than the body to the spiritual being and the energetic being that's there under the surface. We get locked into this idea. And so what I talked about earlier was, hold on. What I talked about earlier was these words in our language that are connected to, like one word, wasisuwintu, is about the home nest, right? It's about the baby or the egg has been born, and then where is it nested? That's one word for mother. There's another word for mother that connects to the internal process of carrying a child. It's and the literal translation is about having a connection on a cellular level, right? Because it's a different lesson that body is learning. That body is learning a different lesson if they're birthing, right? Because they've been born into a body that's biologically capable of birthing. Their set of lessons in this lifetime is different. And so the lessons that they're associated with, one of the options of that lifetime and the lessons of that lifetime is to be able to also move beyond the body, the sacrificing of the body. The new trend is for celebrities to hire a surrogate to birth the children because they don't want to sacrifice their body, right? And so it's about that sacrificing of the body, the giving from the body. That's all part of that learning process. That doesn't mean that's the only lesson. I mean, we're so tied to ideas of gender because it's been imposed upon us and because we've suffered as a result of it so desperately for centuries, right? And all of the distance that we've traveled has been so hard won, as this identity as women. But now we're shifting, right? And we're shifting without us being able to stand on the stage and say, hey, we won, right? We're shifting again to a new way of seeing that's beyond the binary. And a lot of people are waiting for their time on the stage. They're waiting for their moment to say, we are victorious over this thing called patriarchy, not we are working to balance the masculine and feminine energy in the world so that we can live in harmony. And so it can't be understood in social or biological terms. For us, what we call this way of life that we live, the larger context of the way of life is Skijinaway It's this way of walking with life that is in balanced harmony. And so the whole walk through life is about bringing forward that balanced harmony. So we look at it from an energetic and spiritual perspective. And so, the natural processes that provide opportunities for us within the biological body that we're born into have nothing to do with our identity. And when we can get beyond the assignment of identities based on gender, we're going to have a much richer, fuller society, I think. So that's what I mean. I hope that explains.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's
I,
really.
I think that sounds like a really good, I note that it's, we've been going for 2.25 hours. And I think working in balanced harmony is a really good way to tie up to a good end point. Unless anybody has any final concluding things that they want to say.
Can I add something? I think, no, okay, sorry, Mary Claire.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I really thank Sherry because to decolonize our mind, everybody of us, I mean, me at least, I find this confrontation of different worldviews as really helping in decolonize all the, the mind and all what we have eaten up with the models, but also the reaction to the models that we look for as to free ourselves. So because also they are the daughters and son of this worldview. So I really think that also in this group to confront these worldviews and being open to see the differences and where we replicate our oppression is very, very, very important, very useful. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Mary Claire, did you want to say something also?
Just briefly to express my gratitude for where we've come in this discussion and my hope that we can continue, because I know that I, for one, feel that what we're just coming to here with this difficult work of questioning how to continue the decolonizing of our minds relative to these various ideas of the binary and of gender and of honoring and embodying the balance. I'm parched for this dialogue because as I sit here at the Sekhmet Temple in Cactus Springs, Nevada, coming almost a full year of showing up here, this very question is at the heart of some of what has been most confusing and divisive for the community at large. And it offers to bridge, I think, an unnecessary chasm between some of the feminism on whose shoulders so much of the work is continuing, and some of the efforts of the younger generation to do that in a way where there's an othering on both sides. So I'm very grateful to be approaching this in this kind of mutually respectful foray into some pretty confusing and volatile topics. So just wanted to express the gratitude and the hope to continue it.
Thanks, Mary Claire. Does anyone else have any last things to share? I have two very quick things I wanted to share before we close. One thing is a book that I read. It's a very fat book, you can see. She Has Her Mother's Laugh is the name of this book. And this book actually talks about the complexity of what happens in our, this notion of gender and actually how we are sexed. And there's a much more complicated, and I would say not complicated in terms of difficulty, but complex. And the anomalies that we're seeing now, which is why for me, this notion of having this masculine and feminine ideas, it's written by Carl Zimmer. It's actually quite entertaining. In fact, it was so engaging. I listened to it twice and then I bought the book because there's so much detail in it. And it pushed the boundaries of this notion of decolonizing, where I felt freer about recognizing that my fixed notion of what it means to be sexed as male and female was completely wiped off, because when looking at some of the illnesses that we've seen that have been cropping up, they're seeing more anomalies in the DNA. Actually, the sexed gene. So that was the one thing. So to help you decolonize in a biological sense, I think is also very clear so that we get an idea of it. And then the other thing I just wanted to celebrate, because the last time I did this, I actually dropped my salted caramel cheesecake that I just made. So I wanted to celebrate that I didn't drop it this time, and it's now fully shaped and ready to have its caramel topping on it. But I'm so pleased, and I'm really glad that I could share that with somebody, because I'm
yeah. Hey, what a tease! I want some too.
So after we get off, I'm going to make a homemade caramel topping to put on it. So I'm just really happy.
Is all this in your Instapot still?
Yes, this is my Instant Pot 7-inch cheesecake. It's so cute. Isn't it cute?
Delicious.
You have good caramel.
Salted caramel cheesecake. That's true. All right. Anyways, with that, I just want to thank everyone. And Judith, thank you so much. And I want to remind you again about the time change. You know, those of us who don't get to be steady, eventually at some point in time, we won't have this daylight savings time. But the next time we meet, until April 28th, wherever you are, and you haven't had your daylight savings time yet in Europe, it'll be April 28th. Okay. And then those of you in the temperate regions, we actually pushed forward.
Okay.
Not making that more clear. So we'll see you on Saturday for the OM.
Yeah. Okay.
So thank you all, and we will see you soon.
Thank you,
Bye,
Judy.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.